Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Zayn Malik, titled Mind of Mine. You know, it's kind of amazing how history repeats itself, isn't it? Well, of course, not directly, but we've been down this road before, nearly 15 years ago. The boy band now facing the difficult shift of the pop culture landscape away from pop music and towards R&B, with a clear standout talent looking to go solo and thus achieve a level of fame and success that the rest of the band could only dream about. It would be a choice made with the reassurances that the boy band wasn't really dead, and they'd pull things together again for a resurgence. Only deep down, you knew that if the solo album was a big smash hit, there was no going back. But there are a few important differences between the story of Justin Timberlake and Zayn Malik. The first being that, while NSYNC folded very quickly after Justin Timberlake left the band, One Direction managed to push out one more release made in the AM that actually didn't show a huge drop-off in quality. Furthermore, if you had asked anybody 2 years ago who the breakout star from One Direction was gonna be, I don't think anyone would have said Zayn Malik. Everybody's eyes were on Harry Styles, the guy who dated Taylor Swift and had the most immediately recognizable face of the band. Hell, even if you dug through the liner notes, Zayn would still not be the easy, obvious choice. It wasn't like he was the prolific songwriter like Justin Timberlake was, quietly co-writing most of the band's biggest hits. If you look at One Direction, that honor would probably go to Liam. And yet, of the inevitable stream of solo albums to come from One Direction, Zayn was first to the punch. And not only that, he beat out his bandmates with the #1 single, something that One Direction has never able to achieve on the Hot 100. Like Justin Timberlake before him, he was remaking his image into something sleek and openly sexual. And believe it or not, I'm gonna take this very seriously. Even though Zayn is a very different performer than Justin Timberlake, I'm honestly not convinced that he's better, but more on that in a bit. This project didn't immediately strike me as a studio cash grab. For one, there was reportedly a track where Zayn sang in Urdu, referencing his Pakistani heritage and spirituality for a defiantly unique move in modern pop and R&B, especially in the mainstream. His only guest star on this album, Kehlani, an R&B singer you might recognize from her critically acclaimed mixtapes in the underground or that last Pusha T album, but again, not exactly a commercial move here. At the very least, this album promised to be an interesting listen, so I made sure to dig into Mind of Mine. What do we get? Well, believe it or not, I found this record to be a much weirder listen than I was expecting, and a much tougher album to evaluate. And it's a record full of contradictions across the board. Writing, instrumentation, production, performance, the whole thing. Hell, Miguel's Wild Heart was easier to explain thanks to his obvious parallels and connections to 70s rock, but the connections of Mind of Mine are weirder still, spanning R&B sounds and textures over the past 20 years, all drenched in very modern, thick, liquid textures that still bring out plenty of exposed edges. And yet, for as much as this album flirts with darker, rougher sounds and subject matter, it always seems to pivot away at the last second. In other words, man, this album is a tease. But is it a good one? Well, let's start off with Zayn Malik himself. And look, even though I've always found him to be one of the strongest singers of One Direction, on his own against this production, his strengths and weaknesses are all the more apparent. On the plus side, his falsetto is excellent. Superb vocal control, he hits those high notes beautifully, and when he's got the full support of his multi-tracking, he gets some really solid harmonies to back him up, especially on tracks like Drunk and Rear View. Hell, It's You would be a lot less tolerable if he didn't sound as good as he does here. And when he's opposite Kehlani on Wrong, they have really great vocal chemistry and a pretty damn believable hookup jam. I just wish that a lot of the production trusted him to get there on his own, because there are a fair few tracks where the pitch corrections just egregious and unneeded. I get that autotune's a fact of life in modern R&B, but I don't need Zayn sounding like Chris Brown. He's got the pipes to handle himself just fine. What I'm not sure he has, and what kept pulling me out of these songs a lot more than I wanted, is for that as much as he's got pipes and volume, I kept waiting for more of an edge and real power in his voice that doesn't really materialize, that shows that deeper emotional connection. That little bite to make his delivery a little bit more visceral, show a little bit more rawness, push towards more emotive territory with real punch, and yet it doesn't really come. It seems kind of guarded on this record. If he had that punch, I think many of these songs would be a lot stronger, if only because his vocals might match his production that much more. Maybe it translates live, but it didn't really come through here. But make no mistake, so much of this production is very exposed, rougher edges rising out of a mix that really does sound well produced. There's density in the reverb and swell, but it nearly always gives Zayn's voice a lot of room to breathe and swell. And while A Pillow Talk has gotten the most attention as the lead-off single with the huge drums, the thicker distortion, the cloud of vocal fragments around him, there are songs here that play to a very similar formula with much better grooves and atmosphere. The wheedling bass of She against the rubbery synth and trap percussion that actually builds a pretty damn good groove that even plays better on the faded piano touch Drunk, one of the songs I really like on this album. The beat change up on Rear View is also well executed. From the liquid guitar guitar melody against a very pointed hi-hat to a mid-90s feel to emphasize the soft elegance in the piano and the vocal harmonies, which later echoed in one of the weirder songs on this album, Fool for You, which sounds like a Michael Bublé track with some subtle guitar edges. In other words, a really good Michael Bublé song, maybe even a Robin Thicke track off the Blurred Lines album. And yet, that Robin Thicke comparison comes through again on next song, Borders. All muted, somber grooves and subtle little shifts. For me, though, this album got the most interesting when that darker edge started kicking through in the instrumentation. Before, okay, that's a bit of a false start, as I really did not like that shrill synth slather all over the chorus. When we get songs like Wrong, with the darker, rougher, almost sounds like horns melody against the sharper percussion cracks, or the ending track T.O., perhaps the sharpest and tightest trap groove yet, and I find myself wishing that Zayn could bring the same vocal intensity to his delivery as his instrumentation has. My favorite song, though, definitely lUcOzAdE. The dark, rubbery synths against the sharper, glitchier percussion, and then that ominous bass churning up on the verge of really snapping. And yet, as much as I like that song, I really do, probably my favorite on this album, it does highlight an odd but kind of expected issue. For as much atmosphere and texture as this album has, it doesn't really focus on any instrumental melodies to anchor it in the same way. Sure, you get fragments in the backing vocals or a few of the bass-heavy synths or bite in the melody and the guitars, but between the reverb and the much more prominent percussion, you get the impression that that melody is easily the least important part of these songs. And I know I sound like a broken record going on about this, but the best way to make your songs actually stick in the brain is to have that melodic hook in both the vocals and the instrumentation. I get the sad feeling that's ultimately going to hurt this album's replay value. At least for me, it's just not going to stick out as much without those stronger hooks. But now on to the really intriguing part. What's Zayn trying to say with Mind to Mind? Honestly, it's a little tricky to say, because on the surface, this album reads like a pretty traditional R&B record. Plenty of sex songs, dance hookup jams, and a few pretty decent love songs. Even if you always get the feeling that Zayn's walking a very delicate line when it comes to some of these songs between oversharing and not saying enough. It's You is a prime example. He's finally letting his feelings about this girl who manipulated him come out as he just keeps quiet and gives her the silent treatment. But doesn't that entire scene scream of the same sort of emotional manipulation, just in a different way? Especially considering how he's framing the song as the victim. And then there's She, where he's singing about some club girl who's looking for love in the right way, lonely girl hiding her pain, looking for love at the club, and it's the insinuation behind it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. I much prefer Wrong, where at least he and Kehlani were just straight about how this was a hookup for the both of them, and they were equals on the track. Or take Rear View, where when the girl finishes traversing the world, she's looking to come back for a friend. At least Zayn is actually smart enough to realize that he doesn't want to keep looking back on the past and going back to her. Maybe that's why both on Before and Truth, he never really comes out with direct shots against his former band or their management for stifling his artistic growth. But on the other hand, he's playing it awfully cute and calculated, especially on Truth, where he says he's not pointing fingers, but making the heavy implication that it's only a matter of time before the rest of them see the truth. I much prefer lUcOzAdE, where he's stuck with surrounded by fakers and uncertainty and those seeking to use him, and when this girl sashays up to him, try to exploit him and cheat on her boyfriend, Zayn hooks up with her, but it's under his terms. He's got control. That's why T.O. has played it so hard and aggressive for a sex song, daring the girl to say uncle, because that's what T.O. means in Spanish, uncle, and then submit in that clash for dominance, and yet she never does. They're well matched. They're equals. It fits. But really, if I'm being honest with myself, I don't have any real issues with the writing on this album. In terms of pop, it's not that badly written. It's certainly taking more stabs at mature subject matter than Zayn did with One Direction, and he's got enough poise to pull it off decently well, at least for being in the mainstream. And really, that's pretty much my judgment on this album. It aims to tease and tantalize and revel in newfound maturity, but never get too filthy or raunchy, more about the tease than the outright contact. The big problem with that is if you keep teasing and never deliver release, you either drive them crazy or just leave them kind of frustrated and bored. And more often than not, I fell into the latter category with Mind to Mind. There just wasn't that payoff. As a solo debut, it's a good step, but the lack of more defined melodies and a more compelling performance from Zayn leaves me feeling kind of underwhelmed, even if it is a record that will definitely grow on you. For me, it's a strong 6 out of 10, a recommendation, especially if you're a fan who might have grown out of One Direction. But if Zayn wants to play in the big leagues against Miguel, Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, Usher, Jeremiah, or even Chris Brown or Bryson Tiller, he's got some stiff competition ahead. He needs to up his game. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. Got the poll up here, so what do you guys think of the album? I'd be happy to see your ratings, because I can imagine this might be one of my more controversial reviews. But beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming up that you want me to take a look at, I'd be glad to try to find time to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.